The day I screamed thief at a black stranger, my career went viral and then died. Now the whole world has seen the worst 3 words I've ever said. People like you. Tomorrow I have to sit
You know
across
I've
from him.
wanted to do
No
this
cameras,
all
no
night.
script. What he says
Me
next might
too.
save me or finish me. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. The ring light reflection in the cafe window made Tessa Hart look softer than she felt. Outside glass, she was all sharp edges, sharp numbers, sharp deadlines, sharp panic sitting underneath her ribcage. But on screen, the camera caught only the thick, curvy blonde in a cream wrap dress that hugged her hourglass body, the soft line of her waist, the generous swell of her hips, the gloss on her full lips. She'd learned years ago that if you gave the internet a distraction, it didn't always notice you were falling apart. "Okay, Tess, we're losing light," Jenna said, holding the camera just below eye level like they'd rehearsed. Hook, then intro, then the confrontation. We'll get B-roll after. Tessa glanced at the live preview. Her long blonde hair fell in loose waves over one shoulder, the V of her dress showing just enough cleavage to keep the comments thirsty. Her follower count ticker ran through her head like a second heartbeat. 3.8 mems on TikTok, 2.2 mems on Insta, 1.1 mem on YouTube, and dropping in the last month. She swallowed. "You sure we need something this extra?" Jenna's ponytail bounced as she nodded. "Your last 3 feel-good videos tanked. The brand wants edge. Their words. We need you back in the discourse. This kind of social experiment kills online. You call him out, people think it's real, then boom, reveal it's a prank. You hug, you give him cash, everybody cries in the comments. You know this formula." The formula, right? Tessa's whole career lived on formulas now. She forced a bright smile at the lens. "Okay, let's just do it clean then. No one gets hurt." Jenna lifted a brow but didn't argue. They were set up just outside the downtown café, Tessa's unofficial office. Behind them, the sidewalk flowed with late-afternoon workers and students, a mix of chatter and car horns. A few people already recognized her and whispered, phones half raised. Tessa exhaled slowly, counting like her therapist taught her. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. "Rolling," Jenna said softly. The red light blinked. Tessa's smile snapped into place. "Hey, babes," she said, voice bright, shoulders angled to slim her waist to the camera, one hip kicked out. "It's your girl, Tess, and today we are doing something risky." She paused for emphasis, eyes wide. Behind the performance, her stomach knotted. "I've had so much stuff stolen out of my car and my bags lately," she continued. "So today, we're testing if strangers will respect someone else's property or if they'll just walk off with it." Jenna moved to catch the luxe handbag Tessa held up. Cream leather, gold chain, the one she only used for sponsored shoots. "I'm going to forget my designer bag on this bench," Tessa said, gesturing to the metal seat outside the cafe. "And then we see what people do. Do they guard it? Do they ignore it? Do they take it? And then we confront them and see why. Spoiler, I hope humanity doesn't fail this test." She winked, laughed, did the little shoulder shimmy that always got clipped into edits. Inside, something small and tired in her whispered, "Ayard, this isn't what you started this for." But there wasn't time for that voice. There was only time for content. They did 2 trial runs that fizzled. A teenage girl pointed the bag out to a barista. A middle-aged woman just sat next to it and scrolled. Good people. Boring footage. The algorithm didn't care about good people. "Okay, last one," Jenna muttered, squinting at the screen. "We need something with stakes. Someone who looks interesting." Tessa followed her gaze and saw him. He stepped out of the cafe with a to-go cup and a worn messenger bag slung across his broad chest. Tall, maybe 6'2", with deep brown skin that caught the waning light in warm highlights. Close-cropped hair, neatly lined beard, plain dark t-shirt that pulled across his shoulders, jeans, well-worn boots, headphones resting around his neck. He paused just outside the door to glance at his phone, thumb moving fast, brow furrowed. He looked tired, real tired, but his face was open in a way. Gentle. "Perfect," Jenna whispered. "He's got presence. This is it, Tess." Tessa hesitated. The stranger's eyes flicked up for a second, scanning the street like he was checking for exits. Something about the way his shoulders sat told her he carried a lot that no one online would ever see. "Jenna, I don't." "Do you want the brand deal or not?" Jenna murmured. They're already hinting they might move to someone younger. We make this hit. You're back on top. You can apologize if he gets upset. You always do." That last line stung more than she wanted to admit. Tessa adjusted her dress, tugged the hem over the curve of her thigh. "Fine. Last one, then we stop." They reset. Tessa placed the bag on the bench right by the cafe door, making sure the logo faced out. Jenna shifted to a discreet angle with the camera. Their tiny mic clipped to the bench would snag audio. "Action," Jenna breathed. Tessa walked away, counting steps, pretending to talk on her phone so no one thought the bag was hers. They waited at the corner, just around the brick column, where the camera still had a clear shot. The tall black man, Andre, she'd learn later, pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped out again, this time juggling his coffee, his phone, and his messenger bag. He almost bumped the bench, then paused as he noticed the expensive purse sitting there alone. He frowned, glanced around. His gaze skimmed over Tessa without slowing. She'd slipped into a knot of pedestrians, head down, pretending to type. "Please walk away," she thought, surprising herself. "Just walk away, and we'll abandon this." He didn't walk away. Instead, he did the reasonable thing. He picked the bag up carefully like it might belong to someone who'd panic without it, and looked back through the cafe window as if to ask the barista. "He's taking it," Jenna hissed. "Go, go." Technically, he wasn't. But the camera didn't know that. The audience wouldn't care. Tessa's heart hammered. This feels wrong. She stepped forward anyway, letting her face arrange itself into outraged shock, voice turning sharp. "Excuse me," she shouted, loud enough for heads to turn. "What are you doing with my bag?" Andre turned, startled. Up close, she saw the confusion in his dark eyes, the way his fingers tightened around the strap in instinctive defense. "Your what?" he asked slowly. "My bag," Tessa repeated, jabbing a manicured finger at the purse. "I left it right there while I went inside for 2 seconds, and you're just, what, walking off with it?" People were slowing down around them, circling. Phones appeared, recording. Adrenaline sang in her veins, sour and electric. "I was taking it inside," he said, voice steady but carrying an edge now. It was unattended. "Right," she scoffed, stepping closer so the camera could catch every angle, the curve of her body, the righteous fury in her eyes. "Because strangers just pick up designer bags for fun. You know how much that costs, do you?" Jenna moved to get tighter framing. Tessa could feel the lens, hungry. Andre's jaw worked. "Look, I don't know who you are, lady, but I'm not stealing your stuff. I literally just picked it up." "Because you saw an opportunity," Tessa snapped. "This is why people don't trust leaving their things anywhere. People like you." The words were out of her mouth before her brain caught up. People like you. Andre's eyes sharpened. The tiny muscle in his cheek jumped. Around them, the air changed. Tessa felt it even before the murmurs started. "What do you mean, people like me?" He asked quietly. Her stomach dropped. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She had meant people who took advantage, people who... But with his gaze on her, with the ring of strangers watching a blonde influencer accuse a tall black man of theft, the phrase was suddenly heavy with history. She couldn't pretend not to know. I meant people who steal," she said, but it sounded thin even to her. "If you weren't doing anything wrong, why are you so defensive?" He laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "Because you're yelling thief at me in the middle of the street and you don't even know my name." His eyes flicked to the camera. He'd spotted it now. Of course he had. "This some kind of content for your followers?" he asked, voice still low but cutting. "You pick a random black guy on the sidewalk, accuse him of stealing your bag, then you'll say, 'Relax, it's a prank. Here's $100. Don't forget to like and subscribe.'" Heat rushed up her neck. "That's not, isn't it?" he pressed. "You could have done this with anybody. Funny how anybody looks like me today." For a heartbeat, Tessa's curated persona wavered. She saw herself reflected in his eyes, not as the relatable big sister influencer, not as the body-positive queen her fans wrote paragraphs about, but as a blonde woman yelling thief at a black stranger for a video. Fear fluttered in her chest. Fear of being called out. Fear of the brand. Fear of never being enough without the spectacle. "It's just a social experiment," she said, but her voice shook. "We were going to explain. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" he repeated, incredulous. He glanced at the growing crowd, at the phones held high. When he looked back, there was something old and exhausted in his eyes. You have any idea how fast this could go bad for me? All it takes is one cop who believes your little performance more than anything I say. One headline, one bullet. But hey, content, right? Tessa opened her mouth and nothing came out. He held the bag out to her, careful not to step too close. Here, take your property. Keep your experiment. She took it, fingers brushing the leather that suddenly felt heavier than it had in the store. Jenna, still filming, hissed, "Tess, do the reveal. Salvage this." Tessa forced her cheek muscles into a grin that felt sick. Okay, everyone chill," she said, pitching her voice high and bubbly, like this was all harmless fun. "It's just a prank. We were testing to see if people would steal my bag, but this guy was actually being a hero." She turned to Andre, shoving the camera practically into his face. "See, you passed. You're not a thief. Congratulations." She held out a crisp $100 bill they'd tucked into her phone case. "Here, for your trouble." Andre stared at the money like it was an insult, not a gift. "You really think that fixes it?" he asked. "It's just a joke." She insisted desperately. "I do this for a living. My followers love it. You'll be in a viral video. I'm giving you free promo." He looked at her, then at the silent, watching crowd, then back at the camera. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear enough to cut. "Then let them see this," he said. "You picked me because I look like the kind of man you thought your audience would believe was a thief. That's not a joke. That's just you being comfortable with my life as a prop." He let the offered bill fall back toward her hand untouched, then stepped away, shoulders squared, walking down the sidewalk with his coffee and his messenger bag, like he was holding together something fragile and furious. For a second, no one moved. Then Jenna lowered the camera. "Honestly," she murmured, "that was intense. But it's raw. It'll go crazy online." Tessa's pulse thudded. Part of her wanted to delete the footage right there. Another part, a louder, terrified, smaller part, saw the graphs in her head. Saw the brand email subject line, "We're re-evaluating our partnership." Heard her accountant's warning about the house she'd just bought for her parents. "Cut around the worst parts," she said, voice hoarse. "Make it clear it's a joke. Add text. Sad music at the end. Make me look, I don't know, reflective." Jenna nodded, already mentally editing. "Got it. Trust me. We'll control the narrative." But as Tessa watched Andre's retreating back disappear into the crowd, the words "people like you" echoing in her skull, a cold knot formed in her stomach that had nothing to do with algorithms. Hours later, when the video finally went up, her phone lit up so fast it buzzed across her kitchen counter. Notifications bloomed on the screen. Likes, comments, tags, duets. At first she smiled on instinct. Then she saw the first caption someone had stitched over her face. "This is why we don't feel safe." Her thumb hovered over the screen, heart racing, as the numbers climbed from thousands to tens of thousands in minutes. For the first time in her career, Tessa wasn't sure if going viral was a good thing. By midnight, Tessa's phone felt like it was vibrating straight through her bones. It lit the dark of her bedroom in frantic pulses. Notifications, mentions, tags. Her own face looped over and over. The moment she jabbed her finger, the phrase "people like you" floating out of her mouth like poison she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. She'd turned off the ring light hours ago. It didn't matter. Her screen had become its own harsh, revealing glare. At first, it was the usual chaos. Laughing emojis, "Queen, you're so brave." People arguing in her comments about whether he looked guilty. Then the stitches started. Creators she followed, creators she'd never heard of, activists, kids with 200 followers and aunties with 200K, all pulling her clip, pausing her frame, talking over it. "What you're watching here," one woman said, voice tight with anger as she froze Tessa mid-accusation, "is a textbook example of weaponizing stereotypes against a black man for content." Another played the video and paused on Andre's face when he heard "people like you." "Look at his eyes," the woman murmured. "You know what he's thinking? Not again. Not over something I didn't even do." Tessa scrolled faster, nausea rising. Her DMs filled with strangers calling her a racist, a danger, a monster. Mixed in were die-hard fans defending her, calling everyone else too sensitive, insisting it was just a joke. Her brand manager texted at 12:37 a.m. "We need to talk first thing." "This is bad, Tess." She dropped the phone onto the duvet like it had burned her. Jess called 3 times. Tessa let it ring, tears threatened, hot and humiliating. She blinked them back hard. You did nothing wrong, a stubborn part of her snapped. You've done 100 pranks. They always get it. He's the one who took it too far. But beneath that defensive voice was another, quieter one replaying his words. You're comfortable with my life as a prop. She hadn't gone live. She knew better than to put her raw thoughts out there like that. Instead, she opened the Notes app and started typing. I'm sorry if anyone was offended. She stopped, frowned, backspaced. I'm sorry my video was misunderstood. Delete. She rubbed her forehead. The words all felt slippery, rehearsed. The same template she'd seen other influencers use when they were caught doing. Awful things she'd privately judged them for. Maybe I really am one of them, she thought, and the idea lodged in her throat like a stone. Her fingers finally settled on, I'm sorry. She stared at it a long time. Then she kept typing, centering herself without meaning to, talking about how anxious she was, how she'd never seen colour, how this wasn't who she really was. When she was done, the paragraph looked polished, PR ready, like she'd hit Generate Apology on some invisible content machine. She posted it to her story. Within minutes, quote tweets ripped it apart. Not her doing the speedrun from people like you to I don't see colour, someone wrote. So your feelings are hurt that people are calling you racist, but you were fine endangering a black man for a video, another said. Her stomach churned. The apology meant to put out the fire had thrown gasoline on it instead. Across town, Andre lay on his worn couch, his own phone buzzing on the coffee table. He'd tried to ignore it after the incident, throwing himself into grading the last of his students' finals. Being adjunct faculty meant papers, coffee, and worrying about rent. It did not, as a rule, include being at the centre of a viral scandal. But his younger sister, Lena, didn't respect his avoidance policy. Call me now, her text read, followed by 3 links. He sighed and hit play on the first one. His own face filled the screen, caught mid-turn, caught mid-flinch at people like you. The clip jumped to creators explaining why what had happened was dangerous, wrong, familiar. Andre watched himself through their words, through the lens of a history he carried in his body and usually kept under his hoodie. His jaw clenched as he heard her voice again, saw how easily suspicion had slipped onto him like a coat he'd never asked to wear. Lena's number flashed on the screen. He answered. Did you see? She demanded, breathless. You're everywhere. People are furious, for once about the right thing. Are you okay? He thought about lying. I'm tired, he said instead. You're always tired. Her voice softened. Are you okay? He dragged a hand over his face. I keep thinking about how fast that could have gone sideways, if a cop had rolled up right then and there. Yeah, she said, voice going flat in that way it did when she hit the edge of what she could let herself feel. Ma would have had a stroke. They were silent for a moment, both listening to a future they'd narrowly missed. You should speak on it, Lena said finally. Not for her, for you, for us. So they hear it from your mouth too. He imagined opening the front camera. The thought made his skin itch. I'm not a creator. That never stopped anybody on this app, she snorted. Just say what you told me, what it does to you being looked at like that. And tell people to stop sending her death threats. I've seen some wild comments. I don't want that on your conscience either. He grimaced. They're doing that? Yeah, people are people. Some of them are doing too much. We can hold her accountable without trying to ruin her existence. He paused. We? You know what I mean. She sighed. Just think about it and drink some water. He chuckled despite himself. Yes, ma'am. After they hung up, he sat with it. The anger. The fear. The way her face had shifted when he called out the deeper truth, like she was seeing the trap she'd set only after springing it. He didn't like the idea of talking about his pain for strangers to dissect, but he liked the idea of them only ever seeing him as angry black man in viral clip even less. He set up his phone on a stack of books, the cracked lamp behind it casting soft light. Hey, he said simply when he hit record. My name is Andre Lewis. I'm the guy in that video. He explained what had happened in clear, steady words, how he'd seen the bag and wanted to protect someone's property, how fast suspicion had landed on him, how he'd felt his heart race not because he was guilty, but because he knew exactly how these stories could end. I'm not making this to get clout, he said. I'm a teacher. I like my quiet life. I'm making it because for me, and for a lot of people who look like me, this isn't a game. Being accused in public on camera can cost us jobs, safety, freedom. Sometimes it costs us our lives. He paused, fingers flexing in his lap. Holding people accountable matters, he went on. Calling out racist behavior matters. But I'm also seeing people send her death threats, racist slurs in reverse. That's not it either. I don't want that on my name. I want her to learn. I want some of you watching this to learn. I want to be able to walk down the street and pick up a bag without wondering if it's a trap. He ended the video there. No hashtags, no music, just truth. He posted it and turned his phone face down. The next morning, Tessa watched that video alone on her couch, hair piled in a messy knot, yesterday's mascara smeared in smoky crescents under her eyes. Someone had tagged her 100 times. Her thumb hovered over his username. When his face appeared, calm, tired, steady, she felt her throat tighten. She'd expected rage, condemnation, maybe profanity. Instead, his words were careful, humane, devastating. I don't want that on my name, he'd said, talking about the threats she was getting, even while laying out exactly how she'd harmed him. No brand deck, no lighting, no angles. Just a man telling the truth, hands open in his lap. By the time the video ended, her cheeks were wet. Her phone buzzed with another incoming call. She wiped her face and answered. "Hey," said her brand manager, Erica. The tightness in her voice told Tessa everything. "We're suspending the campaign." Tessa pressed her fingers into the seam of the couch cushion. "Suspending or ending?" A pause. "They'll honour what's already been posted, but they don't want your face as the banner of their inclusive line right now. They're framing it as taking time to listen and learn." "Right," Tessa said, a bitter laugh catching in her chest. "They get to do that because I didn't." Erica exhaled. "Tess, I'm sorry. You know I've tried. But there are screenshots everywhere. Your apology didn't help. It centered you too much." She hesitated. "Maybe you should actually talk to him. Not for content. For you." "I don't think he wants to hear from me," Tessa whispered. "Maybe not," Erica said. "But you've built an entire career on talking at people. Maybe it's time to listen to someone you've hurt." After they hung up, Tessa sat there, the silence loud around her. Her instinct was to fix things publicly. Another video, a better apology, some grand gesture. But every idea she had started from the same place. Her fear, her image, her losses. She opened Andre's profile instead. For a second, she just stared at the message button, heart pounding. Then she tapped it. "Hey," she typed, then deleted it. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. Delete." Finally, she started again. "Andre, I watched your video. I've watched it 3 times. You don't owe me anything, and I know my apology posts were garbage. I centered myself and my fear of being seen as bad more than the harm I actually caused you." She paused, letting the words hurt as they came. "You were right. I used your life as a prop. I thought I was doing social commentary. But the truth is I saw you and thought, this will be believable. That makes me sick to write, but it's true." She swallowed hard, tears blurring the screen. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking if you'd be willing to talk to me. Not on camera, not for content. Just as a person I hurt to a person who needs to understand how not to ever do this again. If you say no, I'll respect it." She hovered over send, every muscle telling her to back out, to protect herself. She hit send anyway. The message sat there, a small blue bubble in a sea of chaos. Hours passed. Her followers dropped by the thousands. More brands quietly unfollowed. Jess sent a long text defending their choices, saying everyone was overreacting, that Tessa should stand her ground. Tessa stared at it and realized with a dull ache that ground was exactly what she didn't want anymore, not the kind she'd been standing on. By early evening, she'd almost convinced herself he wasn't going to answer. Then a phone buzzed. A new message from Andre. "I'll talk to you," he'd written. "One condition." Her breath caught. "No cameras, no phones on the table. You listen more than you talk." She exhaled a shaky laugh. Her thumbs moved. "Okay, I can do that. Where?" A moment later. "The café. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Same bench." She stared at the words until they swam. The place where she'd tried to turn him into a storyline was going to be the place she sat down and faced the real person instead. For the first time in days, the knot in her chest loosened. Not because things were fixed, but because she was finally walking towards something instead of just running from the fallout. The next morning, as she stood in front of her mirror, Tessa deliberately chose the softest thing she owned. High-waisted jeans and an oversized sweater that didn't cling to every curve, hair pulled back, face bare, except for a little concealer under her swollen eyes. No costume, no character, just her. Her hands still shook as she headed out the door. When she saw Andre already sitting at the bench, coffee in hand, messenger bag beside him, shoulders straight, her steps faltered. He looked up as she approached, those dark eyes taking her in without flinching. "You came," he said simply. "Yeah," she managed, folding her trembling hands together. "I did." He nodded toward the cafe door. "Let's sit, talk, and this time," he added quietly, "it'll be the only story that matters." She followed him inside, leaving her phone, face down, notifications pulsing unanswered, in her bag. The cafe smelled like espresso and rain-wet concrete when they sat down across from each other. For once, Tessa didn't angle her body toward an invisible lens. She just folded her hands around the warm ceramic mug, fingertips trembling. Without lashes and contour, her face looked younger, somehow more breakable. The oversized sweater softened her curves instead of framing them, like she deliberately stepped out of the version of herself the internet knew. Andre wrapped both hands around his own cup, anchoring himself. Up close, he could see the faint shadows under her blue eyes, the bite mark on her lower lip where she'd clearly worried at it. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. He nodded. "You already said that in the DMs." "I know." She exhaled. "Saying it in person feels different." For a moment, all they heard was the hiss of the milk steamer and the low hum of conversation around them. "Okay," he said finally. "So, you wanted to listen. Start there." She winced a little but nodded. "What I did, it wasn't just a bad prank. It was racist, not misunderstood, not taken out of context. I picked you because I knew my audience would believe you'd steal. I told myself it was about property crime and social experiments, but I saw you and thought you'd make the story work." Saying it aloud made her eyes fill. She blinked fast. "I hate that was in my head," she whispered. But it was. Andre watched her for a beat. He'd expected defensiveness again, the familiar pivot to intentions. This was different. Messy, yes, but different. "When I was 16, he said slowly, I got stopped leaving a store with my friends. We'd paid. We had a receipt. Security still lined us up and went through every bag because somebody thought we looked suspicious." He stared down into his coffee. The creamer had split into uneven islands. "My dad picked me up from the station," he continued. He didn't yell. He looked tired. "Said, son, some people will see you as a problem before they see you as a person. Your job is to stay alive anyway." That was the talk I got, instead of dating advice. Tessa's fingers tightened around her mug. "I've never had to think about staying alive in a mall," she said, her voice cracking on the word alive. "I've worried about bad lighting, about trolls, about brands dropping me, but not that." He looked up at her. "That's the point. You get to treat fear as content. I don't." She swallowed. "I turned your fear into content. I keep replaying your face when I said people like you. It's like I watched myself become every woman I've ever rolled my eyes at on the news." "You weren't the first," he said. "Won't be the last." Then, after a pause, "But you might be the first to sit here and say it straight." She let out a shaky breath. "My instinct is to ask how I fix it. Pay you, donate, post something, make it neat. But I'm starting to understand that's part of the problem. I want the redemption arc more than I want to actually change." He studied her in silence. "What happened after?" he asked, "besides the obvious internet explosion?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Lost the big contract. 2 smaller ones postponed indefinitely. Followers dropped. My inbox turned into a war zone. Some people defended me in the worst ways, saying I was brave for confronting you. Others wanted me dead." She shook her head. "Half of what they said to you hurt me. The other half, what they said about you, hurt worse." She hesitated, then added, "I realized I built a life where I only hear truth if it comes with brand-friendly fonts and B-roll." Andre's mouth twitched. "You really are good with metaphors." She sniffed, surprised by the tiny flare of warmth his almost smile gave her. "That's what happens when you live in a slideshow." He took a sip of coffee, choosing his next words carefully. "You asked in your message what you could do. I can't speak for all black people. I'm not a committee, he said. But for me, first thing is you stop treating this as something to fix in a week. Her shoulders lowered, as if she'd been bracing for that. You get quiet, he continued. You pay people whose job it is to teach this stuff, and you listen to them. You give up some space, amplify folks who don't get brand deals for telling the truth. And not for one healing series, for real. And with you? She asked, almost a whisper. He didn't answer right away. His eyes searched her face. No ring light, no filter, just freckles across the bridge of her nose and a vulnerability she clearly hated showing. With me, he said slowly, you respect the boundary I'm about to set. I don't want to be the black friend you use to prove you've changed. I'm not your redemption story. She winced. Even if that's what your name already is in my comments. That's their story, he said. I'm not living in it. If we talk again, it's because we're two people who met in a messed up way and are figuring out what to do with that, not because it'll look good on your feed. Something loosened in her chest at the word if, not never. If. I want that, she said softly. The two people part, I mean. I don't know who I am off camera anymore. You looked me in the eye that day and saw something I didn't want to see in myself. I can't unsee it now. He considered that. You know what I noticed that day? He asked. That I'm horrible? She said, half defensive, half joking. That when I pushed back, you looked scared, he said. Not just of me, of losing control of the narrative. It felt like maybe there was a crack in the persona. Cracks let light in, sometimes. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard, embarrassed. I thought you were going to say you only saw a villain. Oh, I saw that too, he said dryly. But villains are just people whose worst choices got applause for too long. She laughed, wet and startled. That's disturbingly accurate. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Andre told her about his students, the ones who worked night shifts and still turned in papers, the ones who disappeared halfway through the semester when life got too heavy. He'd started teaching because he wanted them to know their minds mattered, even if the world acted like their bodies were threats. Tessa told him about the first time a video went viral of her crying because of a breakup and how brands had slid into her inbox offering money if she could bottle that vulnerability. How every heartbreak after that had become raw material. I don't know how to feel something without thinking about angles, she admitted. Even now, some part of me keeps reaching for a caption. The day I met the man I hurt, sitting with my own racism. It's sick. It's conditioning, he said gently. Doesn't mean you have to stay there. At one point, a girl with a phone approached their table, eyes wide. Oh my God, she breathed. Are you two... Is this like a live thing? Are you filming something? Can I? No, Tessa said quickly, surprising even herself with the firmness in her voice. We're not filming. Please don't record us. This is real life. The girl blinked. But... Andre raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Tessa took a breath. I know I've made a living turning real people into content, she added, cheeks flushing. But I'm trying not to do that right now. I'd appreciate it if you gave us privacy. For a second, it looked like the girl might argue. Then she lowered her phone, nodded, and backed away. Andre watched her go, then looked back at Tessa. That, he said quietly, is different. She let out a shaky laugh. It felt like ripping off a limb. Maybe it was just pulling out a thorn, he countered. When they finally stepped back out onto the sidewalk, the sky had shifted to a soft, overcast grey. The bench where it had all gone wrong sat empty. I don't know what happens now, Tessa admitted, hugging her arms to her chest. I don't know if my career survives this. I don't know if it should. He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe that career doesn't, he said, but maybe something better does, something smaller, truer. You talk like a teacher, she said, smiling faintly. I am one, he reminded her. Occupational hazard. She hesitated. Would it be weird if I asked you to look at something before I post it? Not as my free consultant, she added quickly. As a reality check. Case by case, he said. If I have the bandwidth, I'll tell you what I think. But you realize the point isn't to use me as your conscience. It's to grow your own. I know, she said, but evidently mine needs tutoring. He huffed a soft laugh. We'll see. They exchanged numbers with a quick, almost awkward brush of fingers. When his thumb grazed her knuckles, a spark shot up her arm that had nothing to do with shame and everything to do with the way his eyes softened when he smiled. Take care of yourself, Tessa, he said. You too, Andre, she replied. He walked away first this time, not retreating, just leaving. It felt different. 3 months later, the internet still knew her name, but for different reasons. The old prank video had long since been taken down. It lived on in think pieces and media literacy classes now, dissected as the Catalyst clip. Tessa had resisted the urge to respond to each one. Instead, she quietly linked to black educators, therapists, creators in her bio and took a step back. Her follower count had never returned to what it was. She didn't chase it. In its place, she'd started a series with no slick name, just a simple tag. Listen first. Short, unmonetized videos where she admitted things. Unlearning moments, biases she didn't know she had, the ways she'd benefited from systems she'd barely noticed before. Sometimes she wasn't even in the frame. Her voice played over clips of resources, donation links, other people's work. When brands reached out again, some did so with careful language, smelling opportunity. We love your new authentic direction. She read their emails and said no more than yes, choosing work that matched what she was actually trying to do now, not what would look best on a deck. She and Andre texted occasionally at first, links, book recommendations, memes that made fun of the exact kind of content she used to make. It was easy in a way she hadn't expected. What are you doing to me? She'd typed once after realizing she'd gone an entire week without checking her analytics. Detox, he'd replied. Side effects include feeling your feelings in real time. They met a few more times at the café, always without cameras. Once she sat in the back row when he gave a guest lecture on media and representation, watching his students lean in as he spoke. Another afternoon, he attended a small panel she'd been invited to after all the controversy, a community discussion on accountability. His presence in the third row, arms crossed but eyes warm, kept her from shaking when she admitted on stage that she'd harmed someone and didn't have a neat bow to tie it with yet. One rainy evening, she showed up at his apartment building door with takeout and a nervous smile. I had a brand ask me to do a redemption arc series, she said when he let her in. 10 videos, big money, full control of the narrative. I turned it down, then I panicked and needed someone to witness it. He laughed, genuinely this time. I'm honored to be your panic witness. They ate on his couch, knees almost touching. The conversation drifted from serious to soft. Favourite songs, their mothers, the weird way grief lingered, even when the person was still alive. I used to think love was everyone telling me I was perfect, she admitted, picking at the cardboard takeout lid. Now the only people I trust are the ones who tell me when I'm not. He looked at her for a long moment. You're not, he said gently, and neither am I. That's kind of the point. Her chest did that strange, aching thing again. They didn't label whatever was blooming between them. It grew in the spaces between apologies and laughter, in the way she started texting him pictures of sunsets instead of sponsored products, in the way he caught himself looking for her in every crowded room. The first time they kissed, it wasn't under a ring light. They were leaving another community panel, this one held in a cramped library room that smelled like old paper and hope. Outside, the sky had gone navy, streetlights haloing puddles. They lingered by the café, the same one, always the same one, as the evening traffic hummed around them. Remember when I thought this bench was a good prop? She said, half to herself. Andre glanced at it. Now it's just a bench, he said, or maybe a mile marker. Of what? She asked. He hesitated, then stepped a little closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the careful way he held himself as if always aware of how much space he took up. Of where we started and where we didn't stay, he said. She looked up at him, heart hammering. Do you ever wish it had started differently? She asked. That we'd just met at the cafe like two normal people. Every day, he said honestly. And also, if we had, I might never have seen this version of you, the one who's willing to burn down her own brand to be a better human. Her eyes stung. You make me sound braver than I feel. You're terrified half the time, he said softly. You do it anyway, that counts. Their breath mingled in the cool air. A car horn bleated somewhere down the block. Someone laughed loudly behind them. It all faded as his hand lifted, hovering near her cheek. He hesitated, eyes asking. She nodded, barely. He cupped her face gently, thumb brushing her jaw, and kissed her. Not camera-ready, not choreographed, just warm, steady, real. Her hands curled into the front of his coat, pulling him closer, feeling the solid proof of him. When they broke apart, she laughed through the tears that had slipped free. "If someone films this," she whispered, "I swear to God." He chuckled, leaning his forehead against hers. Then for once, he said, the story might actually be worth telling. "Not as a trend," she murmured. "No," he agreed, "as a testimony." She smiled, nose brushing his. "You really are a teacher." "Occupational hazard," he said again, and she kissed the words off his mouth. Later that night, she lay in bed, phone face down on the nightstand. She could already hear the imagined questions from followers when they eventually found out. How did you two meet? What's your love story? Maybe one day she'd tell them pieces of it, carefully, respectfully, with his full consent. But for now, the most important part of the story wasn't the viral video that had destroyed her brand. It was that, in the ruins, she'd finally stopped performing long enough to become someone worthy of loving, and wide awake enough to love back.